Your favorite draft and your least favorite draft, or a draft that you didn't like as much?
I really like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers draft. I think they hit a lot of spots that they need. I mean, they went Emeka Egbuka in the first round, which I think was a little bit surprising with their, Chris Godwin coming off an injury. Not sure when he'll be back, how good he'll be when he gets back. But they were pretty deep at receiver. I mean, Jalen McMillan had a great year for them last year towards the end of the season. But bringing in a guy like Emeka Egbuka, who I think is probably, I hate to say the most pro ready because I feel like that term gets overused a lot, but just a guy who's very savvy in the way that he creates separation, catches everything. He's a tenacious blocker. I love what he can do in that offense as a receiver and a blocker for Bucky Irving, Rashad White. Benjamin Morrison was one of my favorite players in the class. I know he had some injury flags that pushed him down the board, but I think from a pure coverage standpoint, he's one of the best cover corners in this class. And then coming back with Jacob Parrish, who I loved. I mean, a smaller guy, probably going to play in the slot for them, but played outside a lot at Kansas State. Just a super tenacious player for a smaller guy. David Walker in the fourth round, I thought, is a high floor player, smaller school guy that's going to come in, provide them some three down ability. A little on the shorter end, but he plays above his weight class against the run. Has some juice as a pass rusher, and then Elijah Roberts coming back again with a guy who can do multiple things in that defensive front. I just think they hit a lot of the players that I like, which is obviously why I think they had a good draft. And then to finish it off with Tez Johnson, a guy who didn't test all that well, but was a pretty dynamic weapon for Oregon for most of his career there. So I love what they did. I thought they hit a lot of spots that they needed to hit. I thought they got a lot of good value in each round. So I really did like what they did. And then you asked what I did not like. Mm-hmm. We talked about Commanders. I thought that they on corner, they got Trey Amos, Josh Connerly. They just traded for Laramie Tunsil, so I thought that was a little interesting move for them. They have a great pass protector in Laramie Tunsil. They're going to have to place Josh Connerly on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, but he hasn't done a lot in college. So I think he's got, he's a great pass protector, but he's not a very good run blocker. So kind of a double up of positions there this offseason. I love Trey Amos, so I love that. But after that, I didn't like a lot. They didn't have a ton of picks. They traded a bunch of picks away, but I thought they needed to fill some more needs because even though they had a lot of money in free agency, they didn't really splurge like they did last offseason. They made some of those trades with Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, but I think they still have some holes, especially on the defensive side of the ball where they did struggle a lot in 2024.
All right, so what we're going to do, we just asked Connor. We're going to go around. We'll go Ian first, then John, then Mike, then obviously Ray, Travis, and then Rochman. We're going to ask you your favorite draft and the worst draft of your thought throughout this year's draft in 2025. Ian, you go first.
All right, favorite draft, I'll say the Raiders, just because no one really says the Raiders, but they had 11 picks. They had a whole lot of needs. I thought Jack Besh was a really nice pick in the second round. Darian Porter was probably my favorite day two pick in the entire draft. I really like that kid. Cornerback, real playmaker, moved from wide receiver to corner. I think he could be really special with his athleticism and size. So I thought they made the right type of gambles, like Dante Thornton too in the fourth round. Like, yeah, that dude might be nobody in a couple of years, but he might be a hit. And that's at least the way that you want to try to draft guys. When it's not a super deep draft and you just have a huge need like that. I think least favorite draft, a little bit tougher one. I would probably say like the Bengals. I kind of walked away from that one, not really sure what they were going for. Shamar Stewart, I get that's a fine pick. It's a huge upside play. It doesn't help them in 2025, but it could help them in 2026, 2027. That's fine. He might be roll the dice types of dudes with his athleticism, but everyone else that they picked outside of Jalen Rivers, who's a tackle out of Miami, I just don't love. I don't see like a huge upside like Demetrius Knight. He's fine, but he's an off-ball linebacker who doesn't really rush the passer. So for me, it doesn't really move the needle. Dylan Fairchild, Barrett Carter, like those guys are fine. They're from big programs, so they have names that you recognize. But are these guys going to come in and be impact starters, or are they just going to be kind of role players? To me, they're a little bit more like role players or spot starters. So like if you're trying to build a championship quality team, I just think that you have one guy, maybe two, that really can help you compared to where this roster was entering this offseason. And it seems like a team that just constantly is kind of stuck in like this mediocre cycle.
John, your best and your worst when it comes to this year's draft.
Well, best, that's a tough one. The problem, I feel like I do this every year with you, Errol, because I think this is the third or the
I
fourth year that
always
I'm
do.
doing
That's
this on this
why.
panel.
Yes.
I kind of see what everybody's trying to do. Going into the draft with an open mind, understanding how teams are built, how the rosters are constructed. It's really hard to kind of like find one that I really don't like. If I had to pick one, maybe Washington, just because they only had 5 picks, and like as I think Connor mentioned, they didn't really hit on a lot of needs and stuff. They have some other needs they could have filled and done a little better job of. I think a really underrated one would be the New England Patriots. Mike Vrabel's first draft gets a bookend left tackle. Okay, let me address that real quick because Will Campbell brought all these concerns about his arm length and can he do all this stuff. I love what Nick Saban said, which is it never bothered him at LSU. This guy, he doesn't have the traditional stance, but he plays extremely well and held up against great SEC pass rushers his entire career. He looks upright, he looks stiff, and sometimes you wonder if he's quick enough, but he always holds up and he always gets the job done. So I'm not personally concerned about Will Campbell. I think he's going to be just fine. You got a left tackle for your young quarterback. You add Travion Henderson to that running back room that really needed some speed and a change up ability. Adding people like Jared Wilson in the third round, Joshua Farmer in the fourth, Braden Swinson in the fifth. These are guys that are going to impact the field right away for the Patriots. I think when we come back to the end of the year and look back on this class, that's going to be the one that gets the award from Neil Stratton at the end of the year.
All right. And now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll say it again, Mike, your best and your worst.
Yeah, so for best, I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns. I mean, I was on one of the regional ESPN networks this morning talking about it down in Florida, talking about that trade from the Jacksonville perspective. And, I said that maybe this is an extreme example, but somebody mentioned earlier that, Travis Hunter he's got to be a gold jacket player. He's got to be a Hall of Famer for this trade to be worth it. And I love Travis Hunter, but this has the potential to be like that Herschel Walker Vikings Cowboys deal. The Browns, when I say that their draft class is my favorite, I'm counting that 2026 first from the Jaguars. I'm not certain that's not going to be another top 10 pick. Certainly Jacksonville's hoping it's not. Gladstone over there is hoping that it's not, because his entire career now is staked to this trade. And he completely threw that value chart out the window by making this deal. But, you look at the Browns, Mason Graham is still a great player to get at 5. He's a great building block for that defensive line. They get 2 starting running backs. I had Sampson as a top 100 pick. I think he only fell to the 4th round because there were so many good running backs in this class that I think teams just decided, we're going to wait till the late 3rd, the 4th round to start taking them. And then, I know we've been talking about Sanders, but in the 5th round, I really don't have a problem with that. This is clearly a discussion that Andrew Berry had with the owner, Jimmy Haslam, and said, look, our future quarterback's not in this draft. He's in next year's draft. And credit to him for doing that, because Andrew Berry's on the hot seat. Okay. But to take a flyer on Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, there's no risk there at all. Now he comes in, he competes, with the rest of it. And of course, Dylan Gabriel will compete as well. And then, if neither of them work out, hopefully Berry gets another year to draft his quarterback next year. If not, the next GM is going to be set up and in a great spot. And sort of sticking with that theme of having GMs on the hot seat, I really did not like what Terry Fontenot did with the Atlanta Falcons draft. As the night started, I thought, my gosh, Jalen Walker in the middle of the 1st round, this is a slam dunk. What a fantastic night the Falcons have had. Well, then they go and they trade their 2nd round pick along with next year's 1st round pick for James Pierce. There's nothing wrong with James Pierce as a player. He's, a fantastic edge rusher. If he didn't have some of the character issues, which I think are a little bit overblown, he would have gone much higher. That said, that's a trade where I'm a little bit surprised Arthur Blank didn't step in and say, whoa, no, you're not trading our 2026 1st round pick. It was clearly short-sighted. If they waited until the second round, held on to the future first, held on to the second round pick, and they're okay with some of the character issues. I know these character issues are a little bit different, but they could have had Mike Green in the second round and still had that first round pick. That part of their draft just sort of reeks of desperation. And for me, that's the worst draft.
Ray, your best and your worst of this year's draft.
The best is definitely the Jaguars because they got Travis Hunter, so that automatically makes them the best.
Here we go again. The love
but
fest.
Look, I think it can be pretty challenging to have a great draft when you're picking at the end of every round, and I think the Chiefs did a great job. I think they had some very good fortune with Josh Simmons falling to them all the way at 31. I had him 9th overall on my board. I think he's a phenomenal tackle overall. I think without the patella issue, he's clearly the number one offensive tackle in the class. I really like Norman Lott again at 63. Didn't love Ashton Gelati out of Louisville, but then they sort of rebound, and I absolutely love the Noel Williams selection at 85. I had him in my top 50. I think he's just a really solid, dependable corner with some really good ball skills, has a great profile for the league too. No real glaring weaknesses I could see. I think that's someone that could step in and help them in the secondary there. Jalen Royals, I mean, it seems like we all forgot the recent past where we were watching incredible Mahomes sort of parallel to the ground passes just bounce off the helmet of his receivers and skill players in the end zone after, making Superman plays. That's not going to happen with Royals. He's super dependable, runs great routes. You could pair that with Mahomes, and they're going to just keep on script in that offense. I think that's a phenomenal fit. And same with Brashard Smith in the 7th round, the running back out of SMU. Great receiving acumen out of the backfield. A really nice, well-rounded player with a lot of upside because he's still young to that position. So I think the Chiefs did a really great job of finding value despite picking late in every round and value that fits their vision for their roster moving forward. So I really love that. And then for the worst, I hate labeling this because whenever you label something the worst 3 years later, as things work out for them, you look like an idiot. But I didn't love the Seahawks
Not for the
draft.
Jets.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's 3 things in life.
I
right?
know. I know.
Gray Zabel there at 18, to me, that's a bit high, especially I believe, unless I know I'm sleep deprived and had a code brown with a 2-year-old earlier, but I believe Donovan Jackson was still on the board when they took Gray Zabel. To me, I love Donovan Jackson. I get the need, but I would have went Jackson there. Nick Eamon, the safety, I know is pretty polarizing, but I'm much lower on him than most. I get the testing, the frame, and the athleticism, but on tape, I mean, if you're playing safety, I need you to be dependable, and he's a sometimes guy. Depending on the game you watch, you're looking at an undrafted free agent or someone who could be taken in the top 40 of the NFL draft. I don't like that inconsistency. Despite the testing prowess and athleticism, he doesn't always change direction or anticipate really well in coverage. So I'm not a big fan of that pick. Elijah Arroyo, okay. Jalen Milroe, fine dice roll. Riley Mills, productive, but okay. And then I really like the Damian Martinez pick late. But the Seahawks will draft a Damian Martinez next year. And the year after that, they always take running back to that profile year after year. So it's kind of like the 49ers the past few years where they'll take a running back that a lot of people really like in mid-day 2 or early day 3, only to take another one the next year anyway. And they're all overshadowed by McCaffrey regardless. So I didn't love what the Seahawks did there. I get they filled a couple needs, but just based on my board anyway, I wasn't a big fan.
And you love the Gremlin. We all know. Travis, your best and worst when it came to this year's draft.
Well, obviously, again, Travis Hunter was a good pick just to disagree with you.
God, what's going on today? What's going on with this?
Yeah, I mean, we're not all affiliated with Arrow, sorry. I'm just giving you a hard time. No, but I was texting with my buddy who is actually with the Jags, and he's been with them for a long time in the analytics department. And he was actually, Mike, is interesting because there's been so much disagreement on that trade in particular. And he was actually saying, I'm kind of confused as to why the Cleveland Browns did that, knowing their analytics department, because they have actually like the biggest probably analytics department in the league. So it's just funny because like there's so much disagreement even within the league across different teams, and both the Jags and Browns are 2 of the most invested analytical programs in all of sports. And so that was wild, just that just vast disagreement on that trade. But I don't want to get into the nerdy, cap impact numbers and, estimated value variance and stuff like that. But we were nerding out just, talking about the different mindset behind that. But it's going to be interesting because if he is a Hall of Famer, which I think he could be, that Jags win, but maybe not. So, because it was super expensive. So I get that. But my favorite draft, and nobody even cares about this team. So maybe they didn't even realize how good of a draft that they had. But the Carolina Panthers, I actually really liked their draft quite a bit. And that's mainly because I was really, it's multifaceted here, but I was really high on Ted McMillan, T-Mac. And when people started second guessing his game like 2 weeks before the draft, or whether it was his long speed or whatever, I'm like, guys, he had, again, I'm a nerd. So he had one of the best predictive metric profiles in the class, accounting for like 40% of Arizona's offense last year. Extreme efficient weapon. Yak ability for a guy's his size is just rare. And first and foremost, maybe the Panthers needed a wide receiver. Like Thielen is a shell of himself. Like Xavier Legette is still raw somehow, like in his mid-20s. And Jalen Coker is a UDFA talent anyway. So it's like they had to get better at the wide receiver position. And in a class that didn't have a ton of depth there, get the best one and then say, hey, look, we need edge help. Yes, that was the chalk. Everyone thought that was going to be the first round pick. Let's get two of those guys in round 2 and 3, and Nick Scorton and Princely Umanuelen. And both of those guys, I think, were underrated. Like Scorton, I mean, he was amazing when he was with my alma mater, Purdue. He added too much weight this past year, lost some of the twitch. He shed back down for the NFL Combine. I think he's going to be more of the athlete we saw 2 years ago when he was with Purdue, explosive. And Umanuelen was one of the most effective, efficient pass rushers, like almost 20% pass rush pressure rate last year. And somehow he drops to round 3. So 2 values at edge rusher. You get your wide receiver and T-Mac. And then late in the draft, you go with very specific scheme needs. Like they don't have a pass catching running back that has a really large sample of success as a receiver. So they go with Trevor Etienne, who really demonstrated that that's a plus value for him throughout this draft process, embarrassing people throughout the Senior Bowl week. Lathan Ransom could compete at safety, at free safety. He started at slot at Ohio State, transitioned to more of a box guy, finished his career at free safety. He does everything on the back end. So felt like that was a good value in round 4. And then Cam Jackson as the ultimate run stopper. They needed to improve on that aspect of the defense as well. So they weren't the worst points scored allowed or whatever defense in the league. So there's just so many layers to why the Panthers draft was a success. So to me, they just really didn't miss almost anywhere up and down the board. And again, I know people don't pay super close attention to the Panthers, but they might be building something actually pretty good. And then the worst is the Detroit Lions. They had the worst reach in round 1 in Tyreek Williams. And that's not just like opinion. The consensus board, he was off by like, I don't know, a half round. Even going in the later first round, a lot of people were expecting him to go in mid round 2. And he is a give you nothing, push the pile kind of pass rush value. But he's a good run stopper, as you see, as they're showing right now. That's fine. But if you're going to take a guy in round 1 as a huge defensive tackle, he better be able to bring some juice in the pass rush. And he absolutely never did in college. And so that's a problem. And then you get to round 3, and they're drafting a borderline undrafted free agent talent in Isaac Tisla, who that was probably the worst reach in the entire draft, regardless of pick or team or anything.
Wow.
So like that was just blow me away terrible. I have no idea what we're doing. They wanted to get, and our Lions writer has talked about how they wanted to get kind of like that body type. And so they just saw a big athletic guy and like, yeah, let's just draft him in round 3. And that's just really poor process. And then later in the draft, I like the Hassanein Boise State edge rush help there. I like Dan Jackson as a value, being, Georgia safety and productive. Even, he wasn't a high pedigree guy, but like, it's just, you really got to squint to like most any pick for the Lions.
So what we learned from Travis is he's a Carolina fan. So Carolina fans, if you need an analyst, and you know that somebody liked your draft, just reach out to Travis. He'll give you a good look. Anyways, Mike, your favorite or your worst when it came to this year's draft?
Yeah, I got sniped by Ray over there with the Chiefs. So I'm going to move on to another team, talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. I feel like a lot of the prospects weren't necessarily guys that I was just super high on. But when you think about them in that system, it just makes so much sense. A guy like Amarion Hampton, they signed Najee Harris earlier this offseason. They know what type of running back they want, and Hampton is like the ideal prospect to fill that type of role. Trey Harris is a guy that I was extremely high on, and I think he plays very well opposite of Lad McConkey. Such a physical wideout, dominates man coverage. Obviously, had a pretty weak out-of-conference schedule slate that helped him kind of boost those numbers. But even when he went into the SEC schedule for the limited amount of games they got to play this season, he was still dominating coverage and making, absolute highlight plays downfield that I think is going to be perfect for a guy like Justin Herbert, who is not afraid to let his wide receiver go up and get the football. Later on in the draft, they had guys like Jamari Caldwell kind of playing that Puna Ford role, and we know that kind of experience can easily work pretty well. Smaller defensive lineman, but I think there's still a lot of success and ability to run stuff in that role. And then Aronde Gadsden was a day 3 guy that I really liked, and I think fits into that Chargers offense where he's a former wide receiver from Syracuse, moved to this kind of slot play more than tight end necessarily, but they kind of had a small stint there where Stone Smart was playing at tight end for the Chargers, and he was producing really well. And it's because Justin Herbert loves those athletic slot shot type tight ends. And I think Gadsden can fill that role extremely well and be a very productive 5th round pick for this team. So maybe not guys that I was like super high on and they just got all the top guys on my board, but I think a lot of great fits into the scheme, and I really trust Harbaugh to make the most of it.